Hey everybody, welcome to another Professionally Incorrect. I'm Liam Clisham, and today we're going to take a look at creating this twist, flippy style animation inside of Houdini. First things first, shout out to Thanos, aka Motion Punk. I was going through my Twitter feed yesterday and came across a bookmark from last year that I completely forgot about, and I immediately had to jump in and try and recreate it. So if you want to see how Thanos did it inside of C4D originally, there'll be a link below, or maybe it's popping up in the top corner right now. Maybe it's both. But yeah, here's a little secret. It's basically the same setup. The tools are almost identical inside of C4D and Houdini. So with that said, we're going to cover how to do this with vanilla Houdini first, and then I'll go into how to make it with MOPs if you're a MOPs Plus subscriber and you have the typography tools that come with MOPs Plus. Before we get started, I want to preface this with a couple warnings. First one being the typography tools require some additional time to set up inside of Houdini versus inside of Cinema 4D. That doesn't say it's a lot more to set up once you get used to it. It's fast, but the first probably 5 to 10 minutes of this first portion of the tutorial is going to be on that. If you don't want to deal with that, go ahead and jump ahead and we'll get into the twisting part. But I just want to warn you that I need to take the time to explain how to set this up inside of Houdini versus inside of Cinema 4D. Also why I gave the warning to think about investing in MOPs Plus. All of these green nodes right here are required to get a decent mesh for extruding and beveling and all that. While if you go into MOPs, it's all built into a nice consolidated tool. We've got a pretty similar setup to Cinema 4D's MoText. So forewarning, need to focus on some typography stuff. Next warning is if you are new to Houdini and don't really know what attributes are quite yet, say spend a week or two getting to know what attributes are. They're very important. I'm going to kind of talk about them in this, but mostly gloss over them and point out which ones I'm using and how they're manipulating things in here. Not, hey, an attribute is this, and it works on points, so you can promote it to primitives and all that. This is not the video for that. So, fair warning, some typography stuff at first, and very little explanation of how attributes work. There's better people to do that. That said, let's go ahead and walk through this. So first things first is the font swap. Like I said, Cinema 4D has a great MoText tool. The font swap is kind of just like the text tool or text splines inside of C4D by itself, except with even less manipulating power. So what I mean by that is if you throw down a font swap, choose your font up here. If you don't find one in here, you can always add one from this here and go to a font file and just add that in, and then type out your text like so. Change however you want it to align. I like having mine align in the vertical bottom so that way it sits nice and flush at 0 there, but we really don't have much else to control. Okay, we can rotate these or scale it or adjust our tracking. We can't do any individual kerning, so on and so forth. Again, why MOPs Plus and the typography tool with that is so great is it has all that built in. Now, if you don't have the funds for that or you don't want to pay for it for some reason, you can get around it. I'm going to go ahead and change this to something like Thorn for the purposes of having these O's and R's counters in there for something a little bit ahead, but the way you can get around manipulating the kerning is by adding text attributes. Like I said, I'm not really going to talk about what text attributes are and how they work exactly, but I'll explain what it's doing here. So it's adding these indexes to each character so we can reference them and manipulate them individually. I like having my geometry spreadsheet down here, which I just popped open, but yours is probably up here if you're starting with the just standard basic startup scene. But if you go in and click on this third icon here that kind of looks like a baseball diamond and the home plate is lit up there. This is primitives. And what primitives are in Houdini are basically polygons. So it's assigning a number to each polygon in here, 0 being T, since we're working with computer thought and verbiage here. And then the very last one is going to be 4, since we have 5 characters, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what do we do with that information? Well, we can take the text index and throw it down to transform and begin to manipulate based on text index. Let's say I want to manipulate the H. So we know T is 0, H is going to be 1 in here. So what we do is type out at for attribute right there, and then text index. And 1 equal sign isn't going to be enough. We have to do 2 to say point to this one specifically, and 1. So now we've selected that. Nothing's changed. Our handles are still right in the center. And what I like to do to get it lined up right is hit move centroid to origin. What that's going to manipulate is our H and bring it to the origin here. So origin is 0, 0, 0 in world space. And we can just reset the translate up here to bring it back to where it was. And to move our handle, I like to go like this, so that way it sits flush at the bottom there, and we can now manipulate it. The font that I've chosen doesn't really need too much work with kerning, so I'm not too worried about this, but even something like Arial doesn't have like the best kerning, so you probably have to go in and start manipulating this. And yeah, you're probably thinking it becomes cumbersome to have a bunch of transforms. Why can't side effects do something about that? It's been requested a lot of times. Don't worry, they know it is quite cumbersome to have to come in, especially if you have a long word like hippopotamus or something. So sorry about that. Shortcoming of Houdini for all that it can do. Like I said, I changed this to Thorn because I wanted to show something coming up, and that is dealing with holes and stuff. So you could take this and theoretically extrude it, add bevels to it, work with it. However, I'm going to throw down an extrude. We'll do poly extrude, like so. And if I, not inset, extrude this out, it's looking okay, right? Well, these lines that are in here actually catch the light when you go to render, and they kind of have like a weird facet in here. You can even see like this line right here doesn't even render in the viewport correctly at all angles. It just gets kind of weird. If you are working with anything that has a counter or a negative space inside a letter, like a O or an R or A, well, yeah, both uppercase and lowercase a, turn this off. We're going to fix it manually, make it look nice. So turn that off, come in, and we're going to throw down a convert line. And that gives us some nice splines in here, or curves as they're called inside Houdini, to work with. And it's basically just like working with splines and extruding them inside of Cinema 4D. The only thing is this doesn't give us nice point separation and distribution is the word I'm looking for. So the way that we can do that so it's a little bit more even, it's not so bunched up here and then spread out here and bunch and so on and so forth, or especially you can see it on the R, how it's spread out here and then super tight in there. We have this node called a resample. And what that does is takes a look at curves and their segments and all of that and tries to resample the amount of points that are on that curve so it's more evenly distributed. You can do it with maximum segment length or number of segments, like so. Maximum segment length is great for this because it just looks at the entire length of a curve and distributes the points along that. There is one gotcha though, and that is this even last segment length. You'll see it's kind of bolded here. And what that's doing is, I think if I come over to the R, yeah, here we go. You can see down here that this last or even last segment actually ends up creating an additional vertice that makes stuff not so friendly as we move forward. So you want to come in and make sure that you just uncheck this before moving forward. It does create a gap in the geometry. I think I'm just having a viewport issue right here because it doesn't make this thing happen there. Let me reset my viewport. Let's see, yeah. Sorry, just having like a weird viewport bug. If you ever have that happen, you can go up to labs here, as long as you have labs installed, and reset viewport. I think even in some of the newer ones, I want to say I've seen it in the help menu recently if you don't have labs installed, but then if you install labs, it moves it over there. Anywho, so yeah, here you go. You can see the gap right there. Probably thinking, okay, well, that's probably going to screw up our extrusions, which it will. But we've got another node to fix it. And it's called the ends. And you can think of it as fixing the ends in here. And when we toss that down, it's initially like this. And we're going to change our close U to close straight, and it closes these ends up. And now you're probably saying, Liam, what the hell? Our circles are weird and not fixed. Yep, one more node to throw down, and that's the hole. And that'll put our holes back. And now you're probably also thinking, we've got these lines back in here. And it's true, they're back. However, because we now have even points throughout, we can remesh this here and get really nice distribution of geometry and triangles and points across our mesh now, which makes extruding look really nice, and we don't have that weird faceting. I will touch upon why this clean is here, though. So this is here because sometimes, depending on the font, I have found that like you might have a K or something, and as the K comes in here and connects, there might be an extra point or vertice there. Clean does what it sounds like. It cleans up extraneous things, like it'll consolidate points. So that K that has 2 points right next to each other and it's not really helping anything, it'll just go boop and plop them together. Delete unused groups, orient polygons, reverse the winding, which is basically flipping normals, fixing overlaps, etc., etc. It just helps clean up the geometry. So I have this in here in case I'm ever using a font that's weird and I have one of those cases of just needing to clean up those points and consolidate some things down. I recommend you keeping it in there too if you end up setting this up as a tool and using it in the future, just in case you swap out for, I don't know, Dingus font bold extra large 12 and it has some weird thing baked into it. That's all that's doing. All right, so now to move on and actually talk about this remesh. All I'm doing in here is it's almost at its default, except for the target size. The target size is usually up here in this area. And if we scale that down, it just gives us some more geometry in there, like so. I also turned off recompute normals because I'm doing that later. And yes, inside Houdini, you have to compute your own normals, just like you have to take care of all this other stuff. Sorry. Again, promotion for MOPs Plus. go get it just for the typography stuff. All right, so there we are. Extrude like so. You're probably used to this inside of Cinema 4D. Come up here in the distance, move that out. You want to make sure that you turn on output back. So if that's not on, it would look like that in the backside there. And then beveling. And the beveling can be a little bit strange. Initially, it will bevel every edge there, and it looks crappy. So you want to come up here under exclusion, ignore flat edges, and then it'll ignore everywhere that is a flat edge. I have had some like weird stuff happen with the viewport with this too. And this looks like it might not even be a viewport issue this time around. I didn't notice it while rendering, but you can see like it looks wrong here, but it's correct over here. So just be aware that you might have to adjust your normal angles a little bit and play with it. Even though it looks right on one side and not the other. I'm not quite sure what that is. It seems like a little bug, but yeah, that is basically it, except for the normal that I was talking about. And yep, you have to add in your own normals. So at render time, it looks right. Throw down normal SOP, leave it at vertices. And the reason I set this cusp angle so low is even though I went through all of this, I did find like just a little bit of faceting in some spots. So the lower the cusp angle is like inside of C4D and messing with the Phong angle, I lowered it way down so just be nice and smooth and not catch any weird stuff, faceting Phong stuff if you're coming from C4D. All right, so that is the typography stuff. Let's jump into actually making this thing twist. So if you're alive and you made it through that typography section, good for you. Give yourself a pat on the back. We're now to the fun part of making this twist. So the only thing that I've done over here is set up 2 columns, and this is just for our twist, and I copied everything, put it over here, and this is shout, so they're exactly set up the same. So if I look at this one, shout, and that, actually I guess they're not exactly the same, is I can already tell that I used a different remesh count over here. Doesn't really matter, it works out. So yeah, the second stream over here is basically identical to this, and as we move forward you can kind of just copy stuff over to your second word if you're going to make it appear like I did in the intro video. So there are a couple ways to go about this. The way that I ended up doing it is controlling it with a mask attribute, because I like having that finite control. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a minute. So when we set this up, I'm going to take this one out of here and just make sure I have a fresh twist in here. Pipe this down in here and turn this on and go ahead and go like this. All right, so when you set this up, I've just got some basic controls of twisting this, setting how it's captured. If I turn on my handles here, you can see we've got this bounding box around it and how it's being captured and what direction and everything. One benefit of Houdini over Cinema 4D is you can rotate through how it's captured really easily just by hitting B on the keyboard, and just that first one I lucked out and got it in the angle that I wanted it. So yeah, you could do this and move the capture origin like so and get your twisting. Cool, you're done. Like, you can animate this, put a keyframe if you want. So come over to 1, hold Alt, click, and let's say go to frame 36, like so. There you go, and you've got a 180 twist. Let's go ahead and make it 360 for posterity purposes. And there we go. We've done it. We've animated it. However, this doesn't give you a lot of control. What if you want to have like a little bit of noise in here so it's not quite a linear thing going on? Or maybe you only want one area of this to twist. This is where attributes and masks come in really handy. Over next to the twist here, you'll see this scaling parameter, and you can drop it down and it'll say scale by attribute. Now it's looking for this twist attribute, but you can put in whatever you want. I've already got an attribute set up here called mask, and I'll talk about setting that up in a second. I'm just going to pipe it in so you can see what's happening. And you can see nothing is happening, and that's because the attribute hasn't come through and activated it. And it's also not helpful that I moved that there. So let me go ahead and move over to this one. So what's going on is exactly the same setup as before, except I'm not animating the capture origin. I'm only driving this twist up here with an attribute. So as the attribute comes over, which you can see this is like a plane fall off in Cinema 4D, as it comes over and activates like so, that red area is the activating, it drives our animation. And as I said, what if you wanted to have more control over this and only have it in a certain area? So I can come into our mask tool, and now it's isolated to this little bump in there where it rotates to 360 as it gets all the way up to the peak of that bump, and then rotates back. So it's kind of like whoop, 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 whoop. I know you love my sound effects. So I'm going to go ahead and make not a constant but linear again and reverse that like I had it. Cool. So what is this tool? Well, there's lots of different mask tools inside of Houdini. This one is one of my favorites, and it's called Mask from Target, but you can do Mask from Geometry if you want to use custom geometry like a sphere or a box or a torus or hell, goopy mess landing on something, you can use that to make masks and attributes. But we're going to go ahead and throw down mask and target because it's nice and simple. And turn this on. If you click this little eyedropper icon there, it shows you where the mask is being applied. If you have your geometry spreadsheet open too, if you go to your points, because it's being applied at the point level, right up here it automatically sets it to points, but you can change it to other areas. No, I'm lying. This is for group. Ignore that. I'll try and cut that out of the video. But yeah, this applies to points. So you can see as we scroll through here, the exact points that are getting values. And you can change the radius like so. So this is just a point in space. It's at the origin. And if we move this around, it's based on the radius there. So basically like a sphere, except coming from a point where if you've ever worked with spheres inside Cinema 4D, you know that sometimes if something is inside the sphere, it doesn't quite pick it up anymore. So this is just radiating off that single point in space. You can also do a line, which is also based off the radius and a infinite line. So it doesn't matter where this line goes from end to end. If it leaves the area, it's all about the radius in the surrounding space. I think I'm saying that right. But if I move this up and down on Y, because the radius is now moving away, that's what's happening with the line. So it's not going to end here and here, it goes on infinitely. It's all about the radius of this. So if we pipe this up, even though it's nice and big now, if I were to move it down a bunch of units, that radius still falls off like so. And then we can do a plane, just like a plane effector inside of Cinema, and again, control your fall off here, or like this, as I was showing before, kind of make it all weird and fun. And if we drag this back and forth, you'll see we kind of get like a, I don't know, red, white, and blue fireworks display of this kind of going on and off. And there's defaults in here too of like steps and smooth and whatever you want. And you can flip it around too. So reverse it, upside down. It's like Missy Elliott, flip it and reverse it. And we're going to go with linear there, like so, and make this 1. And drag this back, hold Alt, click on it to set your keyframes. And I'm going to go up to 48 here. Oh, actually, let me take a look at this one. Where did I go with this? Oh, I went all the way to 72. Wow, I didn't think I went to 72. All right, well, we'll go to 72. And like so, hold Alt again to set my keyframe. And there you go. So now if we come back down to our twist, like I said, it has a default one in here, but if you click on this drop down, you'll see your mask up here, or you can just type it in there. And I believe if you click this, if you don't already have a mask, it'll let you paint a mask too. I'll set up one of those masks from Paint, or Paint 2 mask. I forget the exact name off the top of my head right now. But now, if I rewind and go like that, you can see we're getting the twist. All right, so how do we make it reveal? I'll talk about the chop stuff and trail in a little bit, but the reveal is really the big part, and then I added these in afterwards. So what a delete does is what it sounds like. Just deletes things. So I'll put this here and click on this, and right now it's deleting selected. I don't have anything selected, but I could start to select from a range of things. You'll see it's now deleting every other polygon in there, every other triangle that's in there, or you can delete by an expression. And this is where the power comes in handy, is you can type in attributes to start deleting areas. So over on this side, I have changed the delete from primitives to points, so that way we get all the points deleting off. And then I just realized this is backwards. So let me reverse that. So that then as this twists and it gets to more than 50%, so it's saying a mask value greater than 0.5, you see all these values in here, and as they go up, if it gets to a value greater than 0.5, it blasts away the points, like so. So you might already be figuring out what we do next. We just do the inverse on the other side. So on this side, you can come through like so and reverse this. So a mask less than 0.5 is deleted. So everything that's at 0 right now where the mask hasn't been, don't show it. And then as it comes to the halfway point of 50%, 0.5, it pops back on. And then I've got these polyfills in here just to fill the geometry as it's breaking. So as this breaks apart, fills in these areas in here. That way, as you're lighting it, you're not getting like weird shadows clipping inside there, depending on how your camera's set up and all that. So that's just there for that. Same with this side as this is coming on. That way there's no just gaping hole for light to get captured in right there. And then we put it together, and I've got a camera here already set up. If I scroll through like so, that's how it reveals. The only thing is this is a little bit different now because I was messing with it. So I'm going to go ahead and hold Alt and drag to get a copy of that. Shake it off just by dragging really fast and plop it in here. Now our timings will be the same, and that way we get a similar lineup like so. Okay, so that's the gist of the setup. If you want to leave now and you know everything else about rendering, go ahead. I'm going to talk about adding some velocity blur and adding some like follow through stuff for this next part. So for follow through, MOPs has a really nice thing called spring modifier. You can pop that on here like so and just check position. And we just need to have an ID attribute on everything. So again, this is like a little bit more advanced section, and we can change this attribute to ID. And we need to change this to points. And now the spring modifier will work. And so as this twists off, you can say, oh, it gets all wobbly, like so. So that's one way to do it. The spring modifier, however, works by doing a simulation, and it can get a little bit heavy at times. So I learned this from my buddy Jason a while back. I want to say 1 or 2 years ago. He put out a video on chops. And what chops are is basically like Signal built into Houdini. So if you've ever used Signal from Grayscale Gorilla, this is basically that on crack. So I'm going to turn this off here, turn this back on. And what we're going to do is you can hit tab and type motion, or sorry, chops. It's not, doesn't come up with motion effects. So if you do chops, do a chop network like so. And you can go inside and there we go. Throw down a geometry node. And what this geometry node is looking for is just a null or something to pull in inside. So I put a null here to go to chops. And so I've connected to that. I've changed the method from static to animated because this is an animated object. And then I threw down a jiggle deformer. And this jiggle deformer kind of just does what we saw before, except I need to actually have the channel on so we can look at it. And now it gets all jiggly. And most of these words are exactly what they sound like. How stiff do you want the springs inside here to be? So if I lower that down, they're whoop. What if I tighten it back up? They're super stiff springs in there. Dampening, if I lower that down, it doesn't fall off as fast. So it just kind of goes whoa, 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 whoa. I'm really hoping these sound effects are helping. But if we turn up the dampening, it's not as strong, and it even cancels out the twist a bit. So yeah, you just kind of need to play with it until you find what you want. Set this to another null out. You don't have to do this. I just do it because it's nice and clean. And you want to make sure that you have the blue flag on there. And we go up to our top there, and then you can throw down a channel SOP to pull the channels out of your chop network. Just like we did with the motion effects inside, we want to point to the out null that's inside of the motion effects here and change this to animated. It comes out as static too. And that's how you get some nice wiggly jiggly stuff going on there. And then I do the exact same thing on this side and then combine the two like so, and you're good to go, except I don't have my chops on right there. Cool. All right, so next is, as I was saying, with velocity. Inside of Houdini, it doesn't calculate velocity for you, just like normals, so you need to calculate that yourself. I have it set up after my chops, so that way it picks up the movement of the chops, but before the delete, because if you try to calculate velocity on points that are being deleted and then added back in with the polyfill, it does not like that. So you want to have your velocity computed before any points are coming or going, and definitely after any position manipulation. And it's really easy. When you throw down a trail stop, come down, compute velocity, you can just leave it at that. I like to up my cache size to like 10, but you can use whatever you want. And then when you go to render, you'll have your velocity vectors to go. Whew. Okay. That was a lot just to get to this point. Now let's take a look at doing it in MOPs, which is much faster. All right, so the MOP setup, doing some remeshing at the end there. It's just taking a second to catch up. Way easier. Throw down MOPs plus, type out your word, get your bevels and extrudes and all that set up. Go to match size, so you get it set on your baseline. What match size is doing is just telling you where you want to have this sit. So the maximum bounding area of the word, the center bounding area of your geometry or word, or the minimum there. So that just lines it up on the bottom there. Next, what I'm doing is throwing it unpacked. So the way MOPS works is it takes geometry and packs it, so it's actually points. And you can see right there, there's just like one point there. If I right click on that, or middle click, which, there we go. There's actually 5 points in here. But instead of having a bunch of geometry, it packs it down into points. So it's lighter weight and easier to manipulate. However, for twisting this, we're actually manipulating the geometry, so we need to have all of those polygons in geometry. So we unpack it here, and you'll see our points and primitives now transfer up to around 4,000 versus the 5 that we had before. So we can now manipulate everything. I'm coming in and remeshing it. Just let that bake for a second. So we actually have quite a few polygons to manipulate. This time shift is pretty cool. It's just pausing it. So instead of it trying to remesh every single frame, it's saying, just pull in frame 1. We don't need you to keep remeshing. Slow your horses, and there you go. All right, next. MOP shape fall off. Kind of looks similar to the mask from point, or mask from plane that we were using before, because it's basically fields inside of Houdini. Henry's done a great job. You can choose linear, spherical, box, so on and so forth, doing the exact same thing. If I do a preview fall off, you can see we've got this nice fall off in here like we were doing in the other setup, and we're now down to just, you know, a few nodes to make this happen. Got our twist set up in here as well. Instead of mask, I've put MOPs fall off, and whoop, there we go. We've got that all set up. Here's our velocity trail from before. Here's the delete from before. The only thing I don't have set up in here is the motion effects jiggle stuff. So yeah, if I hit play, you'll see this comes through. It needs to be tweaked a little bit so there's better timing. Might get covered up by motion blur anyway, but what was that? It was maybe 2 minutes to cover how to do it in MOPs versus the other way. Granted, I can go through it a little bit faster because we've already been through it with the other stuff, but please save yourself some sanity and get MOPs Plus so you can have cool typography tools. That was a lot in a short period of time, As always, if you have questions, comments, etc., how I could have done something better, please feel free to comment below. If you like what I'm doing, go ahead and hit subscribe, ring the bell, all that jazz. I appreciate everyone following as long as you have over these years. I'm almost up to 10,000 followers, which is crazy to me because I'm so inconsistent. So thank you so much for everyone that's following and still subscribing to this day. All right, everybody. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.